Video games need melodrama. In the case of any other medium, melodrama can be viewed as nothing more than a genre. In the present day, melodrama has certainly become more relevant than one would anticipate. A lot of the storytelling techniques used in melodrama are being applied to other films, even if they themselves are not stated as such. Look no further than the superhero genre, which, in present day, has become an amalgamation of melodrama. Even so, it does not take away from the fact that melodrama is still a genre. Therefore, just like any genre, it does not need to be present in every work. Not every work needs to be a western, not every work needs to be a comedy, and not every work needs to be melodramatic. Nonetheless, even if not every film, book, or TV show needs to be a melodrama, there is one medium that stands as a great exception, and that is video games. Video games are a wholly unique medium of art. It is the only medium where audience members are more than just viewers but active recipients involved in controlling the story. Thus, having such a different set of rules attached naturally means that video games have a completely different perspective on what may seem obvious in film or TV. Tying back to that point stated in the beginning, unlike other mediums, video games need melodrama. Or, at the very least, many of them needed to make a successful gaming experience. This would be a perfect time to mention that this grand claim is targeted specifically towards narrative-rich video games. There's not much discussion to be had on melodrama with games that lack narrative. However, once digging further, the importance of melodrama in narrative video games truly becomes evident the more you look into it. Before delving into deeper introspections on game plots and the different ways melodrama is utilized, first, a rudimentary analysis on the subject is warranted. Games are first and foremost games. As obvious as this statement may sound, it is very important to remember because what it signifies is the first aspect that almost any game needs to worry about: the gameplay. The reason this discussion is even situated to a smaller aspect of video games and not the whole medium is because, as previously mentioned, there are such instances as no narrative games. Games do not necessarily need a narrative. Gameplay is the most important aspect of games. It is the reason why most engage in the medium to begin with. Thus, even in story-rich games, the gameplay is still the most important aspect. Everything else is in service to this main event. Understanding this makes it all the more evident why melodrama is so important to video games. Melodrama is built on pathos. Its goal is not to tell complex plots that bring into question world-scale issues, but rather to let your emotions go on an experience, even if sometimes that requires abandoning logic for a grander sense of pathos. Additionally, more often than not, melodrama depicts the classic good versus evil. It is not necessarily concerned with demonstrating the existence of good versus evil, since, in most cases, that is already the groundwork that melodrama stands on. Putting virtuous characters in far more perilous situations to evoke emotion is far easier to accomplish with this notion of simplified morality. These two core components are the baseline for why video games need melodrama. To draw an example of a series that will be brought up constantly, let's turn to the Yakuza franchise. Yakuza is a beat-em-up crime drama that more often than not features lead protagonist Kiryu Kazuma being caught up in a huge underground conspiracy. Regardless of what the plot is, Yakuza is a beat-em-up game first and foremost. There are several instances where Kiryu gets into fights with random criminals on the street. Now, from a pure logical sense, if conflict such as this erupted onto the streets, Kiryu would simply get shot, since he is dealing with underground crime. Yet, this is never the case. Almost all of these brawls on the streets of Kamurocho rarely involve a firearm, but simply the thugs attempting to beat Kiryu up. Additionally, in most cases these fights start for no other reason than Kiryu just walking up to a group of guys who don't like the way he is walking. If this was the underground, they would not blow their profile to start a fight in public because they don't like the way a civilian is walking. But no form of logic should even matter because it does one important thing. It allows for players to engage with the gameplay. In all of these random encounters we are given, all we know is that we are the good guys defending ourselves from the bad guys. Melodrama focuses on sensationalism, which is derived from exciting or shocking events, which is the core essence of what video games are structured on. Melodrama in its simplest form assists in laying the groundwork for the main event to occur, the gameplay. and that alone should prove why melodrama is needed in games. But it's certainly not enough to emphasize the strengths it provides to the medium. Without a doubt, melodrama is far more than just a tool narrative games use to set up gameplay scenarios. In many cases, melodrama is the narrative itself. Metal Gear, Yakuza, The Last of Us, and practically almost any JRPG use melodrama to some degree to tell their stories. Video games are three-dimensionally constructed environments that we can literally navigate and move through, which allows them to be arguably the most immersive experience any art form can be. When tied in with the proper narrative, video games have the potential to be even more immersive, allowing for players to grow a closer affinity and affection with the characters they control. The fact of the matter is, achieving this harmony with gameplay and narrative is most accessible with melodrama. That is not to say it's impossible through other means, but it is certainly the most efficient way in doing so. Melodrama is a powerful, persuasive device, even if many believe it to be absurd or over the top at times. The fastest way to get us to care about a character is to show them in extreme situations filled with emotion and spectacle. Look no further than The Last of Us, which contains perhaps the best prologue found in any narrative-focused video game. We are introduced to Sarah, her father Joel, the zombie outbreak, and then subsequently the death of Sarah, all in the span of 15 minutes. On paper, this does seem like it would lead to rushed storytelling. In fact, the TV show adaptation of the game more than doubles the time spent on this prologue, adding room for more build-up with the character of Sarah. However, neither approach actually fails when considering the medium it's thrown into. In the game, all these events in the prologue are perfectly paced. There's a sense of urgency present right from the get-go, and it culminates in a heavy moment of pathos when Joel is left holding the dead body of the one person he cared for. It's extreme, but it accomplishes exactly what it needs to do. It gets the audience to care for Joel by the end of the first 15 minutes, which in turn allows for greater immersion to be drawn from the gameplay when players are controlling the very person they saw in such a vulnerable position. Without melodrama's persistence on reaching an emotional climax so early, many would not warm up to Joel nearly as quickly. Furthermore, the game assures us not to waste the short runtime of these scenes and essentially makes it the emotional backbone for the main relationship between Ellie and Joel. This relationship is arguably where melodrama is the most potent in this zombie survival game. Joel lost his daughter, and part of him does not want to accept that he sees Ellie as his daughter the more time progresses. It is almost as if he is scared to become attached again, in fear of having to experience the very same loss he is all too familiar with. This is what leads to emotionally resonant scenes such as the argument Joel and Ellie have about separating from one another.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel, but I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
In a nutshell, the entirety of the first game is all about framing this emotional struggle Joel has of attempting to move on and find solace in a new life. The simple fact is that it is using a zombie story as the outlet to tell a melodramatically resonant tale. Ultimately, there is a reason why this game is held in such high regards, and it's for scenes such as these that have emotion first and story second. Additionally, some of melodrama's other characteristics are also quite prevalent in the medium as well, more specifically with JRPGs. As previously mentioned, melodramas tend to incorporate fairly straightforward depictions of good versus evil. Many would believe that such a simplified outlook can lead to flat characterization. However, melodrama would view this as a positive, since more simplicity in the characters allows it to be easier for them to become a surrogate for the audience. JRPGs are typically long-winded stories that follow a group of characters on some form of a journey. More often than not, a lot of these characters are very simple and lack a great deal of character development. From a game designing perspective, it simply makes the most sense to take this approach. In a game like Persona 5, for example, the main protagonist is silent and quite frankly has no development. Silent characters in gaming can open an entirely new discussion, but there's no closer gaming can get to a surrogate for players than this archetype. However, not only is Joker a fairly simple character, but so too are almost all of his party members. Ryuji is a delinquent who is a real softie on the inside. Yusuke is an eccentric artist, Makoto is a strict student council president, and Futaba is a socially awkward hacker. All these characters are very simple in nature, and after they are introduced, have fairly limited character development. From a game design standpoint, this choice makes a lot of sense. It significantly helps the group dynamic when each character has one very specific personality. It makes each of them much more unique than one another, which incentivizes different players to consider choosing different party members. Similar to Melodrama, JRPGs view simplified characters as a positive and not a negative. Up until this point, the analysis with melodrama in video games has been fairly one-sided, focusing primarily on how melodrama enhances video games. However, this relationship between the two is not quite that simple. In the same way that melodrama can make a video game a more emotional and realized experience, so too can happen the opposite way. A game character is meant to be the skin the player wears that makes them feel a part of the world and everything that comes with that perspective. This strength that only gaming has the ability to possess is what allows players to become even more immersed in the stories being told to them. Melodrama prides itself on being able to deliver tales of grand emotional weight. Gaming allows for this potential to reach new heights. Common thematic devices such as moments of realization, sacrifice, and pathos have so much more room to deliver their emotional hooks to the audience when the audience themselves feels like the events transpiring are happening to them. In Yakuza 0, the second protagonist, Goro Majima, is tasked with killing a man known as Makoto Makimura. Upon finding out that Makoto is actually just an innocent blind girl, Majima cannot bring himself to kill her. Instead, he does the opposite for all of the plot and serves as her guardian against the Yakuza, who are hoping to hunt her down. Majima even ends up developing feelings for her in the end. However, all of these emotions come to a head when this scene happens.
Makoto! なんやこれは。何しとるんやお前。
After spending hours upon hours playing as Majima, understanding everything about him, why he does what he does, this scene serves as a grand moment of pathos. The only thing that was going right in Majima's life was Makoto, and in one singular gunshot, all of it comes crashing down. In a fit of rage, this leads Majima to rip his shirt off and prepare to beat the ever-living crap out of every single person present there that let this happen, leading to a gameplay section where the players do exactly that. For moments such as these, it hits so much harder not only because players feel like the character, but because they are given an outlet to be the character. In this moment, anger, frustration, and heartbreak are only few of the emotions that one could feel, and all of those have the opportunity to be let out with gameplay. It enhances what is just a moment of pathos and makes it into something even more striking and emotional. On top of this, video games can also improve contextualization for scenes as well. For instance, moments of sacrifice are plot developments readily used by many melodramas. It is moments where characters make selfless acts for the betterment of others. In video games, when moments such as these arise, they can serve to make such scenes even more impactful. In Marvel Spider-Man, near the very end, Peter is given a vial that contains a cure to a virus that is killing millions in New York. He can either use it on his aunt, who has already been infected and needs it right now to live, or save it for later so they can duplicate the antidote to distribute to others. It is an impossible decision to make, yet in the end, Peter chooses to make the sacrifice and let his aunt die. Alone, this scene is an emotional roller coaster, but with the context of the game, this decision becomes even more impactful. For several hours, players have been able to experience what it means to be Spider-Man. From helping a man find all his pigeons around the city, to stopping the mentor he looked up to the most, Spider-Man always tries to save as many people as he can. Thus, when he's put into this situation, it is his responsibility as a hero to continue just that, even if it's at his own sacrifice. Ultimately, video games serve to enhance melodrama just as much because of their opportunities to enhance what already are emotionally resonant thematic devices. Melodrama is an extremely useful tool that almost every narrative game utilizes to some degree. From a simple ground level analysis, melodrama assists greatly in setting up gameplay scenarios that are highly reliant on sensationalism. Not only that, but natural plots as well. Melodrama is very efficient at getting the players to care about the characters they control and in turn feel like them as well. However, video games also benefit melodrama just as much. Due to the immense amount of immersion that comes from gaming, this allows for many of the thematic devices used in melodrama to be even more resonant with the audience. In the end, both video games and melodrama bring out the best in one another, which is exactly why video games are inseparable from melodrama.